impact of the COVID-19 on the aviation sector is undeniable. According to IATA, the aviation sector globally lost over $180 billion and counting in 2020 alone. To what extent did the pandemic disrupt aviation in the country?
The impact of COVID-19 has been severe. Because you've just stated the losses that the aviation industry got $180 billion plus in the last year, we were also affected. Our traffic, which is movement of aircraft in our airspace, reduced by 94%, which resulted in a reduction of our revenue of 86%. So you can imagine, that is almost all our revenue gone. So, of course, we had issues. How long would we be able to survive in a situation like that? What would happen to our staff members? Will we have to let people go? Will we have to reduce pay? How are we going to maintain our equipment? So, a host of issues came up that we need to contend with, and therefore it was of grave concern, that drop in traffic.
Let's talk about settling in, adapting, and mitigating the effect of this pandemic.
As a regulator, where we do the licensing of people, companies, aeroplanes, etc., we had to devise ways in which we can do our oversight program remotely, meaning that, first of all, the International Civil Aviation Organization allowed a situation where we could automatically give extensions to certain licenses and certificates that we had given aviation personnel, like pilots, cabin crew, engineers. So we were able to give automatic extensions for certain licenses. So a license for a pilot could be extended automatically by 45 days, and then another 45 days. If your operating certificate as an airline was expiring, you were given an automatic 6-month extension. So with those extensions, we didn't have to go anywhere in order to continue with our oversight role. But then a certain time came now when things began to improve. We began, again guided by ICAO, to do remote assessment of competence or capability in operators. So we have begun to do that, and now that things are getting back to normal, we have started our surveillance program again, where we can actually visit operators, inspect their premises, inspect their aeroplanes, inspect their hangars and maintenance operations to see that they are continuing to comply with the regulation.
August 2020.
Yes.
Domestic flights resumed, same to international flights. But now it's not business as usual. We have a new normal, and the COVID-19 health protocols that have to be adhered to keep people safe. Business has to go on. Flights have said it's not physically possible to leave one seat open. Everyone has to be on board, but there are protocols to be followed. Let's talk at the airlines.
All airlines are strictly following the COVID protocols that have been introduced globally. In Kenya, we also introduced our own international or travel protocols when you're inside aeroplanes. Starting from the airport, when you get to the airport, how are you going to prevent COVID prevention? Until you get into the aeroplane, you fly, and then you land at your destination and end up in your taxi or whatever means you're going to use from the airport going out. So that aviation environment, we have a protocol on how to prevent COVID-19, and they're being strictly followed. So at random, we have inspections. Our inspectors, they go on trips. So they will observe and see whether the airlines are actually following those protocols. And if they don't, then people are penalized. Again, the public also informs us. You know, when a member of public is in an airplane and is sitting next to somebody who's not wearing a mask, and the cabin crew is saying, you must wear your mask at all times, that person takes a photo or a video of what is happening inside that airplane, and they send it to us. So we go to the airline, and we give them strict instructions and warnings that cannot be seen again. And if it does, we are at liberty to suspend or cancel or even revoke any license or certificate that they have. So the consequence would be very, very serious if they did not adhere to COVID-19 protocols.
If you look at a pandemic, it has two sides. It brings its downfall, but there's always an opportunity there.
Yes.
What opportunity as KCA have you seen in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Okay, so what happened during the pandemic, there are certain activities in aviation that actually increased exponentially. A good example is the cargo business. Cargo started all of a sudden flying medicines around the world, personnel to places where they were required. So, and there was never a ban on cargo transport because you're not carrying people. So the cargo business increased exponentially. People started converting their aeroplanes now to cargo, and people like KQ have also repurposed one of their Dreamliners, removed the seats, and then are able to carry cargo on board the airplane where the passenger would normally sit, together with the normal place where they carry cargo. So the innovation in cargo has meant a lot of aircraft are being converted to cargo because there's no restriction. So that aspect of business grew. The other area that grew was medical evacuations. You see, when people got sick with COVID, and they were in places where it wasn't good care, you had to organize medical evacuations. Let's say from places in the Bundu, somebody's gotten sick, or maybe even in another country. Many flights occurred from our neighboring countries to Nairobi, bringing COVID patients for specialized care in our hospitals. So medical evacuation is one of them. The other one was repatriation. Foreigners began to be taken back to their homes from Kenya. So you'd find the British were here, the French, the Germans, the Americans. So they were being picked from here and taken home. So that is called a repatriation flight. But at the same time, when the aircraft were coming here, they were bringing Kenyans from those same places back home to Kenya. So repatriation flights were many, and they were not restricted.
Let's stay with cargo for a minute, unless you have Ethiopian Airlines and KQ over
Yes,
there.
yes.
I mean, you've mentioned KQ converted one of the Dreamliners into a cargo plane, but Ethiopian Airlines CEO recently during a couple live events say they have a fleet of over 25 cargo planes, and ET and Astral are among the airlines that have been selected to transport and distribute vaccines across the continent.
Yes.
In terms of competitiveness, is Kenya Airways and other Kenya airlines really taking advantage of the opportunity that cargo aviation is providing?
Yes, indeed, Kenya Airways is trying. It took a while to repurpose the Dreamliner. It was us who approved that conversion. It was me who signed for it. Yeah. We gave them that authorization and approval 2 weeks ago. So now they're in the market looking for cargo business. And incidentally, the vaccine transportation requirement would be huge for a long time, because you're talking about billions of doses of vaccines. So the Ethiopian Airlines and the Astrals have signed up to carry a few million doses. But as you see, we've got billions. So the market is huge. So KQ has an ability or even the opportunity to be able to bid. And I believe the next bidding cycle for vaccine transportation, I'm sure KQ will be one of the winners of that contract. Yeah, because remember, it's just begun. Yeah.
Now, speaking of movement of cargo, trade has to be at a really high point for goods to be moving. And the African Continental Free Trade Area, which was recently ratified, will just see that movement of goods in the beginning and people when normalcy resumes. But for all this to be able to happen, it's been linked to a single transport airline market. What are your thoughts with regards to the implementation and success of this single transport airline?
32 states have signed a solemn commitment that they are going to implement. But what we've not decided is beginning when and how are we going to do it. So we've got choices to consider, whether we will maybe do a regional agreement, or whether we'll do individual agreements with the countries who are willing to do. So the implementation challenge is how we're going to do it. So many states in Africa are grappling with that. What is the best way that will suit their own interests first, even as they consider implementation. So I think we have a bit of a way to go.
Yes. Infrastructure-wise?
Infrastructure, there's several developments in airports around Africa, including the most recent one is the Terminal 1, B, C, and D here at Jomo Kenyatta. They have a refurbishment program that is almost £1 billion shillings that has already started. It's a one-year program. It will upgrade the stature of this airport. Tanzania has already completed a brand new terminal. Uganda is just about to hand over a brand new terminal that it has done. Ethiopia in Addis Ababa, they have just completed an extension of one of their terminals. Rwanda has announced and has begun construction of a brand new airport a few kilometers outside of Kigali at a lower level, a better site. So there are important airport infrastructure projects that are happening, which are now going to make this SATAM and the Africa Free Continental Trade Area actually implementable. So give it another 5 or so years, we'll see phase 1 of SATAM happening, and then by around the 10th year or so, I think we'll be seeing a lot of implementation. Yes.
Now, what measures has KCA taken to ensure that the aviation sector is prepared for unforeseen calamities? Because COVID has taught us that it's possible and it can happen and its impact is devastating.
Airlines is another story altogether, because airlines require big sums of money to survive. And unfortunately, none of our airlines have been given a rescue package, a stimulus package. We're not like the Americas, where their airlines were given like $40 billion divided among these major airlines by their government. Europe have done the same. But in Kenya and in Africa, I'm not aware of anybody who has been given a stimulus package for an airline. Remember, we are having financial challenges, even ourselves.
And even before COVID?
Even before COVID. African states or developing states do not have the kind of cash backing to be able to rescue airlines. So airlines are on their own. So it depends on the deepness of your pockets and the willingness of your financiers to assist you. But what I can say is that the Africa Development Bank, the Africa Export-Import Bank, are aware and they are willing to assist the airlines. So airlines are talking to them and to come up with some kind of package that will be able to sustain them. So we're waiting to see to what extent.
Okay.
But what is fortunate is that we are getting out of the pandemic. Infections are reducing. The preventive measures are working, and also the vaccine is out. It's coming out. So within the next year or so, it is likely that this pandemic will be no more.
Okay. Two things as we come to a close. Your 2021 projection for both people and cargo.
Well, once we get out of the pandemic period, and people begin to travel for business and more particularly for leisure, tourism is an extremely important component in the growth and development of aviation. Tourism. You will want to go and see how do Nigerians live. So you want to take a cheap flight to Lagos for a weekend, and you see how does a Nigerian live, what do they eat, and things that, things, human interest. Tourism, cultural tours, and things like that, those will happen because even this pandemic has made people so inward-looking. They've been stuck in their homes or they can't move. When people are free to move, I believe they will now start traveling.
That's what we have. Thank you.
Asante. Welcome.